Well, thank you for joining today's Jira training session. Today, we're going to be concluding the part where we talked about how to create a project. And I believe we've also talked about how to set up a workflow using a default workflow, basic workflow without any sort of control or governance in place. So today's training, we're going to be focusing on how to put controls and validators on your workflow to make sure that it's well governed and well controlled in your organization. Before we start, please remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, like, and also share this video with the rest of your friends and colleagues that will find this useful as well. So let's start. So right now, what you're seeing on my screen is I've logged on into my project in Jira. Please remember, as I always say, my Jira instance is a Jira cloud. So you might not be seeing exactly the same screen or the same views in your system. The differences between all these are where things are located in terms of how you navigate to where you want to get to. For every Jira instance, you should be able to access your project by looking at the top of your screen here, which you then go into project and then choose the project you want to. So I'm already in my project, and now you need to navigate your way down to the project setting of the project. Remember again, as a recap, for project setting, if you are in your project and you do not see the project setting at the left side of your screen, either at the bottom of the screen or here where it is, it simply means you do not have you are not a Jira project administrator. So you would not be able to modify or update your workflow screens or any of the schemas you have already for your project. So do not freak out. All you would need to do, if that's the case for yourself, you can reach out to any of your Jira support team, and then they will be able to help you, guide you through what you need to do. For some organizations, there's always going to be like a Jira support team. So when you need workflows created, modified, or copied, or whatever you need done, you would need to reach out to them, and then they would do the modification for you. In most organizations within the work streams or your project, you would have like a team, or if that's the role that you've been given to, then you probably would have access to be able to go into the project for your area and then modify and simplify workflow schemas or whatever it is you're trying to do. So if you do have the permission, so you would need to go into the project settings. Once you click on it, at the left-hand side as well, you will then be able to see, workflows, screen schemas. You'll be able to see field configurations and everything, issue types, everything you'll be able to see at the left-hand side. For the purpose of this training, I'm going to be going into the workflow. So right here, this is the workflow that I have for this project. It's just a really, really basic workflow we created when we created this project. And now I'm going to go into the workflow to edit it. So I'll click on the pencil. For my Jira instance, I need to click on the pencil. For other Jira instance, where you can see where it says copy of software simplified workflow, it's going to be a hyperlink. And all you need to do is literally just click on the hyperlink. For some as well, other Jira instance, you would have the hyperlink and also the pencil sign, so you can click on either or. So I'm going to be clicking on the action because that's the only option that I have for mine, and waiting for it to load up. Okay, so now the last time we created the workflow having all the old transition all on them. That means it's not governed. You can create a ticket today, and any member of the team can move the ticket to close, or they can move it to in progress without any sort of restrictions, without any sort of validations. if that's the way it's set up. That in itself is not really bad. It's not bad if you're doing that. But for some organizations or most of the people that I've coached and talked to, most of the setup has to do with being able to control how the teams behave, control setting information, and also having controls in your workflow also helps to when it comes to data quality issues. There is a lot that you can do in the workflow that kind of controls that behavior and drives the team to be able to do things properly. An example of that would be setting validations in place. And another example could also be, understanding how your team works and then knowing what needs to happen at every given step of the process. Say, for example, at the point of creating, your epic stories or whatever issue type, you might not at that point in time, you might not have all the necessary information like what squad or what pod is going to be working on that ticket. So you would not want to put a restriction or of a validator to say you must give me the squad name at that point in time. You might want to say, yes, at the point where we're going to in progress, we will require that certain informations are mandated. We will require that certain informations are kind of like done in a way that works for the team. So those kind of things is what you can then go into your workflow, add conditions in there. You can put validators in there. You can do quite a few things on the workflow that then controls and forces the team to do things in certain way. Okay. So right now, what I'm going to show you is we're going the last episode we already removed all the all tools that we had in there. So this one, we're going to go in a controlled way. So rather than you being able to go from to do to all, so any of this transition, any of the statuses can go into to do. You might want to then put a transition in place. A transition simply means the direction you want the flow to go. So everybody must go through this step. So rather than say from in progress, you know what, I want to go straight to done without passing through some gates or some processes that would be mandated that everything go through. So those kind of things is what you want to look at as well. So for you to do that, all you need to do, you can either click on add transition up in here. Once you click on it, and in here, it gives you from which status to which status. So now we want to go from to do, and we want to go to the next status, which is selected for development. The next important information you need to put is what the name of that transition. So the name of the transition is what you would see on your ticket that would then give people that, yes, this is the status that they need to go into. So I would just call selected for dev, and then you can click on done. So here where it says screen, in my next video, I will be showing you how to then add different resolution screens to different transitions based on what rule governs the team. So for the purpose of this training, I would leave that as none because we don't want any resolution attached to it. So I'll click on add, and literally that's what you need to do. So you just need to determine how the process would work. So do you want to go from to do to selected for development? Once you're done, the other way you can also do the transition is you can literally click on the blue. Can you see the circles? When you click on the status, it comes with this circles, white dot, dot, dot sign you can see all around the box. Once you hover over it, and you just drag it down. You can see the line. Can you see the blue line? All you need to do is drag it to whichever status you want that transition to go into. So for this, I'm just dragging it to the next one, which is ready for development. And then this screen pops up as well. And then all you need to do at this point is just do the name. So the name can always remain as the status if it's the same, or if you want to call it something else, it's entirely up to your team. So I will just call this ready for dev. Okay. And then I'll click on add, and then that should add the transition into that for us as well. Okay, so at this point in time now, you can see that some piece of work can go from ready for development and straight to in progress, which is fine. And then you put your in progress in there. Okay. And then you click on done. And then you can go sometimes your team, because you probably would have different teams, your BAs, your testers, your developers, everybody working within your team. If things are ready for development, it can either go into in progress. For some people do have different statuses, so it might not be in progress. It might be, pending QA or QA testing or QA done. The statuses that you have can be defined and bespoke to your team, depending on how you guys are structured and what you're trying to achieve. So I would always say, always make sure the first thing you need to do is understand how the team works, what you guys want the flow to be in terms of your developers. What do they do? How do they do it? What does the flow? What does it look like in their team? If you have BAs, if you have BAs, you have your testers. What are the key statuses for them? That is a must have. Yeah. So those are the kind of information you would need at hand before you go into creating or updating your workflow. Once you have all those information, then you can begin to understand, okay, what steps do we need to take? Do we need to go from in progress straight to testing complete? Is that possible? No, your testers would say, oh no, every single ticket that has been completed from the dev point of view would need to go through an NFT, would need to go through tested. You understand? So that in itself is a mandated step rather than you just saying, yes, dev is complete, now go to QA complete. No, you don't want a transition allowing people to just go from there straight to the QA without the QA team, it going into the queue for the QA team to do what they need to do. So it's very, very important that understanding the team structure, understanding what you guys are trying to achieve helps to define and determine how you build your workflow. The workflow in itself controls virtually almost everything. In terms of your reporting, that's going to be very key as well. In terms of when you're saying you want to track things for BAs, for testers, for your product owners, that in itself becomes a vital step that you need to make sure that you have that on lockdown. Otherwise, when you get into the high level things, which is the reporting that needs to be pulled together for senior management, it then becomes a lot more trickier if the workflow is not properly defined. Okay. And the transition in itself needs to be done because once you now want to put controls in place or conditions or validators in place, you need those transitions in place. What you do not want to do is just put, because when you put in validators as an example, you're trying to make a certain step or a certain field, a required field to be populated at a stage. If you've applied that at any of the transition, then that way you're causing the team will probably not be able to create or edit that ticket because you've mandated it. But in real sense, if the team is not structured in that way, if you've not put it in the right transitioning, then it stops them from doing what they need to do. And in that way, they might lose time because everybody is trying to figure out what's going on, how do we rectify it, and stuff like that. So, in terms of trying to avoid confusion, please, please, please make sure before any update is done to the workflow, because that's the heart of the project. Please make sure that the team structure is understood properly. The team process is also understood properly so that when you go into the workflow, you then know exactly what needs to be done without breaking the flow for the team. Okay, so in terms of adding validators into the workflow in itself, what you need to then do is, if you see at the right side of the corner, when you click on your transition here, for example, I'll click on in progress, which is where I am, and then I'll click on validators. Once you click on validators, it's loading up. Once you click on validators, it will tell you add validator, and then I'll click on add. And at this point, it gives you you have quite a few commands in there. So it's just about understanding what you're trying to do. Say you're trying to make a field a required field, that nope, before you can move away from in progress, we need to make sure that a checkbox has been checked, or we need to make sure that, it's been assigned to a QA as an example. So you would just click on this, make field, required validator, and then click on add. On the next screen here, all you need to do is find the field you want to make a required field. So for example, we're making the assignee a required step. So I will click on assignee, and then you can put in an error message, or you can leave it blank if you want to. And then I'll click on add. Okay, so you've added the validator to there. So if I then go back to my workflow, okay. Okay. So now I'm going back to the workflow, and I'm going to refresh the screen. So the validation keep, and then if you go back to the still loading, if you go back to the in progress one, and then you can see now you've got one validator. Previously you had 0, but now it shows that you have one validator. So you can have different conditions or validators set for each of the transition if that's what you want. It's just, as I said again, it's just all about understanding the team structure and what your team is trying to achieve. And then that would help you to do this. And always remember that once you were done with that, always refresh your screen so that the system, pulls it up, and then you publish. If you can see, the publish sign will probably be at the top of your screen here. So in here, because the workflow in itself is inactive, so that's why it's not giving me the option to publish. Yeah, so now what I'm now going to do is go into my schemas. I will go into my workflow schemas, and then I will go into the schema for this project that I'm working on, and then I'll click on edit, because now I'm trying to make that workflow and active so that it then becomes live for everybody to use. And then I will go into add workflow. Okay, yeah, it's already been added because that's the copy one. Let me just double check. So the one we were working on previously, I think was a copy of. So it's already up in there. Now I can click on publish. Associate. Workflow has been published. Yeah. So if I then go back to my project, so I'll just navigate back to my project. This is the project. And then I'll go back to the project setting, which is at the bottom of the screen. And then I'll go to the workflow section just to now check everything that you've done. Now that you've published it, now that you've made all the changes you need made, I'll go into the edit button, the pencil sign again to see, and you can see now this is no longer an inactive workflow. And you can see now that if I go back into the in progress, you can still see my validators. Okay. So now you can test it out. Always, always, always test out any changes you've made. Test it out yourself before you reach out to the team to say it's done, to make sure that what you've done, you've done it the way it should and it's working the way it should. So right now I'm going to just create a ticket quickly. I will just do test. Okay, no components. Okay, I'll just click on create. Okay, I'm viewing the issues. So this is the ticket that I've just created, right? So remember, we put the transition on the in progress. So right now, you can go in, you can do whatever you want to do without putting an assignee on it. It would let you do that. But if I go into this and I try to transition, can you see? From the to do, I cannot see the in progress in here because we have controls in place. Every single ticket that's been created has to go through selected for development. So for me to go to in progress, I need to pass through that route because that's what I want. And then it goes into the queue for, the prioritization, and then this can then be prioritized. You do what you need to do, and then it can then be set to ready for development. So the development team can then pick this up, add this to their backlog, and begin to, assign people to rate as the safe fit. And then you can then say, now we're good to go. We can then begin to move this to the in progress status. So you can see now at the point of going to in progress, if you look at the bottom of my screen here, it failed because the field assignee is required. So that tells me the validator that we've put in place is actually working as it should, because what the validator is supposed to do is stop people from doing things without following the rules. So the rules we've set in place is before you can go to in progress, it must have an assignee on it. So this would then force people to then go back and say, oh, yeah, it's failed because there is no assignee. Now they would go back and then they would assign, I'll assign myself to it. Now I should be able to move to in progress. If I click on in progress, I've been into in progress. So that's what it means when it talks about putting controls and governance in place to help the team manage the behavior. And also it really does help when it comes to data quality as well, because there's certain things that gives you a lot of issues. Anything that is like a data quality issue for your team that is a must field, or is a field that needs to be populated but it's always not. So it's always important to put validators on, so that way you're fostering the behaviors of the team to make sure they do certain things without skipping. And then you don't have to go back and chase people to say, oh, this is not done. Why is this not done? It's just a way of forcing people to do things based on rules that, you set in place for the team. So I think that covers it for today's session. Thank you for staying true to the end, and I'm glad you liked it. So please remember, if you haven't subscribed, um, click on the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and share with the rest of your friends and colleagues. And remember, subscribe, and also share with the rest of your friends as well. I would be putting up another video that then talks about how to copy a workflow from another team into your project, or mirror what another team is doing for your project. So please watch out for my next video, and thank you for staying tuned.